So you can't rely upon having the same minister for 5 years.
But I think people is concerned about stability of the government itself.
Yes.
So they can live happily ever after. I think that's a concern of the people like me and you, I believe so. Yeah.
The people voted for the party, not for you.
Political wayang kulit, yes or no?
Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Headlines, your one stop for all the news that made the headlines and more. I'm Hazwin Hassan, and this week we're going to look back at the recent launch of Padu, the government's first ever of its kind central database hub. Aimed at implementing targeted subsidies, this initiative signifies Malaysia's progressive stance in harnessing the vast potential of data-driven governance. Padu is poised to bring about a groundbreaking transformation in government services and policy development by providing a comprehensive socio-economic overview of every household in the country. We'll also be discussing the Dubai move, a move that was dubbed yet another attempt at toppling the government in power following the now infamous Sheraton and London moves. Speculations began when Community Communications Department JCOM Deputy Director Dato Ismail Yusof claimed that opposition leaders had vacationed together in Dubai to meet and plan the attempt. Ismail even alleged that specific tasks were assigned to agents responsible for identifying members of parliament who might switch support to the opposition through inducements solely to establish a backdoor government. There's a lot to unpack here, a lot of drama it seems. Just barely 2 weeks into the new year so far, and as usual we have our guests in studio to help dissect these issues. First up, I have with me from the Business Times editor Sharon Kaur. Welcome to the show, Sharon. Your first time, right? Great to
Thanks,
have you.
Hazwin. Yes, it's my first time. I'm so excited to be here to discuss about Padu and the Dubai move.
Great to have you, finally. And we also have Professor Jeffrey Williams, a professor of economics and dean of the Institute of Postgraduate Studies from Malaysia University of Science and Technology, MUST. Not your first time, though.
Not my first time, but it's a pleasure again, as always, to come.
Great to have you back. And as well in the studio, we have Professor Nick Ahmad Kamal Nick Mahmood, the head of the National Professors Council's Governance, Law and Management Cluster. Professor, welcome to Beyond the Headlines.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to have you. So now on Padu, Professor Jeffrey, in your own words, the new central database hub Padu is potentially the most important economic policy change that I have seen in 20 years of living in Malaysia. How so? What makes Padu so great?
I think that because it helps us to get a better understanding of who is in need of assistance. And that's extremely important for good policy design. So in the past, policies have been directed toward particular groups, B40, M40, T20 in terms of income, or particular regional groups or ethnic groups or gender, age, whatever it is. And it hasn't been forensic enough. And that means in particular, in my view, it's that people have been falling out of the network, the safety net. People have a right to be given welfare support, and I think many people haven't had it. So what Padu does is it gets information on an individual basis, and that means we can target it much more effectively. And also in the design of the policies too. I mean, to begin with, it will just be for targeting subsidies. But in the longer term, it will help with all manner of economic policy, not just in the welfare system.
Was there something you wanted to ask?
Do you think that it's timely that the government does this now, or is it something that we should have done 5 to 10 years ago?
Well, I've been advocating it for a very long time, probably 5, not quite 10 years, but certainly 5 years. When we had BRIM, when they introduced BRIM, I said at that time that I would have preferred it to be, instead of giving it twice a year or whatever it was then, giving it on a monthly basis and then turning it into a proper structured social protection system. And that would have required at that stage to collect this type of data. But there is a lot of information from BRIM and from all of the variations up to that, up to STR as it is now. But what Padu is aiming to do is to clean all of that data up and make it much more useful in terms of policy. It's not just for people on lower incomes, actually. You can imagine in the future that the government would want to subsidize things for the rich. I mean, they're already subsidizing electric cars, for example. So people have often said, well, if I'm wealthy, why would I sign up to Padu? Because I'm never going to benefit
it,
from
yeah.
this? Well, firstly, you might be wealthy now, but then next week you might lose your job. In which case, it's useful for you to be signed up, because then immediately you would be eligible for welfare assistance. But in the future, it might be that the government wants to subsidize things that even wealthy people are interested in, like green technologies or things which are socially beneficial. Then you would need to be signed up too. So it does offer a possibility for everybody to benefit from various forms of subsidy and assistance. And my view is that the exercise they're doing now is cleaning up all of that data, and it's cross-checking. People have also said, well, they have the data from LHDN, they have the data from EPF. Yes, they do, but it's different data collected for different purposes, and so the figure that they have will be different. And what Padu is doing is saying, well, the LHDN data is different to your EPF data, is different to your STR data, so which is the right one? And that's got to be useful for everybody. So I think it's a very big exercise. It's been done very quickly, and I think that's a benefit of having done it in-house with the civil servants, because not only is it building capability for the civil servants, they've been able to do it in double quick time, less than a year. So I don't think we would have seen that if it had been outsourced.
Apart from being timely, and of course the obvious would be the reduced costs by using in-house manpower, what are the benefits really can we see from not having engaged with consultants and external contractors?
Because I think the people who built it, the civil servants, will be within the system that's going to be using it. That's really important. You know, you can buy something from a consultant as much as you want, but then what happens is you have to train all of your people, and then when you want to change it, you have to bring the consultant back in, and then when you want to expand it, you have to pay more to the consultant, and the consultant is always outside and perhaps not available, or certainly you have to pay them more. So they'll always make themselves available when they're being paid. But what you have here now is very large number of civil servants in the right ministry, the economy ministry, who know how to run the system. Why? Because they were there when it was developed from the start. And then imagine you want a new system to do something else. You have this expertise in the economy ministry. You can go to the agricultural ministry, the women's ministry, or whatever it is, and build something similar for a different purpose. It's hugely beneficial. It's adding a lot to the capacity of the civil service to do this work.
So you feel that is sufficient enough to run a good system?
I think it's working.
Okay.
You know, I know that people, if we look at it like this, there were genuine concerns about data security, and I think this is real, because I think every one of us knows, either ourselves or we know somebody who's had a problem with their phone or had a problem. I certainly have, and just yesterday I was talking to people who were all saying the same thing. We all know about it. So these issues of data security are genuine concerns. But as far as I can see it, it was launched last Tuesday. Concerns were raised on Wednesday. By Thursday, the government had already said, we're on the case and we're fixing it. And then by Friday, everyone had moved on and was starting to ask the question, what can it be used for? What are the benefits? Why should I sign up? All of this sort of thing. And now, you know, we have more than 1 million people already signed up in a very short period of time. The government is still, of course, looking at these data concerns, which will never go away. But that's true also of any app. You know, you have an e-hailing app, a bank app. We put our data in there all the time. Of course, we're concerned about that. There's nothing specific about Padu, which makes that a special case. But looking after the data security is important. But now I think that everybody's getting behind Padu and can see that it's beneficial.
There were a few bugs and issues, security issues, right, just within hours after its launch. But the ministry, the economy minister himself, Ravizhi Ramli, he gave assurance that this would be it would be unlikely that it would happen again. Is that assurance enough, do you think? I think it is, because you can test a system like this as often as you want in a laboratory, so to speak, or in a development in the office, you know, somewhere like that. But it's only when you give it to real people who are unfamiliar
and who are grumpy and who are not really sure and they haven't got their glasses on and whatever it is.
Right.
When you actually give it to real people in large numbers, that's only then do you know, does it actually work? And that's really why we're going through this pilot phase, this implementation phase to begin with, to iron out these problems. You would expect that there would be problems. We have 3 months for people to sign up. Hopefully during that period, the problems will be sorted. And then I think it's in June, isn't it? They're going to spread it out to a million people. And that means that by the time of the next budget in October, the government can have a full-scale social protection system in place to be launched in 2025.
So by mid-year, then we would have a good picture of
Yes.
the socioeconomic standings of every pocket of the
Well,
population?
everyone who signs up.
Right.
Yes, and as I've mentioned, I think it's worthwhile for you to sign up. I don't see any particular reason, even if you are in the top income groups, why you would not want to sign up.
Right. But there's the other thing about accessibility, because integrated data systems, it's been long talked about, right? The other thing is making sure that everyone has access to it. And then you have, in some parts of the country, some pockets of the population where they don't even have access to basic internet. So how are we going to penetrate those areas, right? And even more so, there are quite a number of people who don't like this idea of shared big data. They reject this concept entirely. So how do we go around? How do we work around Luddites, for example?
Okay, so I think there are two issues. First is people who don't have access to internet. I mean, there is still a digital divide issue, but Malaysia has a very high internet penetration, even in the most distant rural areas. But if you're not connected, then they are sending out, or they're already doing it, aren't they? They're sending out government civil servant agencies from the various local agencies at national and state level. Even in the opposition states, they're sending out people to help registration. Yeah. And in my view, that would be a relatively small number of people in that situation. But of course, they need as much help and support as possible. Then for those people who actively don't agree with the government collecting data, don't put your data.
Right.
I mean, it's not compulsory. I mean, if you don't want to receive a possibility of welfare assistance, don't put your data.
I've got a question. Okay, Padu includes basic information, address, education, current work status, income for the past 12 months, monthly financials, how you spend your money and all that. Do you think there should be more information included, or this is sufficient enough?
Well, from an economics perspective, that's all you really need in order to devise a system for targeting subsidies or targeting welfare support. You don't need anything further than that, in my view. So some people have said to me, well, will Padu be used for broader government services, applying for licenses and stuff like this? I don't see that it's envisaged for that purpose. And there are other platforms. And actually, it's probably not a good thing to have a single super app with everything. You should be able to get it from different places. Right. But certainly in terms of economic policy, are you eligible or not for various welfare support transfers, cash transfers or whatever it is? All you really need to have is what is your income and whether it's above or below the eligibility threshold. That's really all that you need. Now, I think when it's talking about your commitments, this is really to ask the question, well, I might have a relatively high income, but I have a lot of people I have to look after. They might be elderly, they might be OKU, they might be kids. And so although my income itself looks high, my outgoings are high. And that will help to look at what we call net disposable income, and it's net disposable income which will be the indicator of whether you're eligible or not for the benefits.
Speaking on eligibility, there might be, some people who might take advantage of, because you fill up all the information on your own, right? And it's tasked on you to be truthful, to be
Yes.
honest, right? So there might be some people who feel that they can use this to understate their income so that they can receive more benefits than they actually should.
Sure.
So how do
Well-
we protect the integrity of the data that's coming
Okay,
in?
well, if they want to understate their income, good luck with that. Because you can do it with anything. You can do it with LHDN. You don't want to pay high tax, you understate your income, right? So it's nothing new. STR, you want to be eligible for STR, you understate your income. It's nothing new. But with Padu, you understate your income, and then they find out that from your EPF, your income's higher, or from the land registry, you own 5 houses, or from LHDN, that actually you've been getting side income and bonuses and all of this.
Right.
Then in Padu, they're cross-checking it against these other places. So it's much more difficult for you to understate in Padu.
And get
than
away with
is-
it.
And get away with it.
Yeah.
Now, there will be penalties, and depending on how harsh the penalties are, the penalty could be just very simple. You understated, that's it, you're not eligible. Come back next year and don't lie. It could be as simple as that, or it could be a compound. And if it's very serious and systematic fraud, then of course there are criminal possibilities. But in my view, it'll just be your income's wrong. Get it right. When it's right, you'll be in shape. And until it's right, you're not going to get it. That's how it will be. But Padu will cross-check it against everything else, whereas the other databases don't. EPF don't cross-check your pension contribution against your number of houses that you have.
Right, yes.
Yeah.
Doesn't do that.
Yeah.
And LHDN does ask you for your salary, income from investments, income from rent, income from other. Of course it does. But it doesn't ask you about other things related to car ownership. It doesn't, you see, so this data is not the same, but in Padu it will be cross-checked. It's a better system.
So do you think through Padu the government will get a clearer picture of the national household income and distribute the subsidies more effectively?
Yes.
Yeah.
Then there's no that's the main purpose of it. Yes, they will do that. And the problem with the subsidies is well known, and I don't think we need to rehearse it again. Everybody understands it's very expensive. It's going to the wrong people. So we have to do something to push that down. But if you remove the subsidies, these blanket subsidies, you remove them. Imagine suddenly that RON 95 went from 2 ringgit 5 cent to 4 ringgit. Even the most wealthy would find that difficult. So what you have to do as you remove it, you have to redistribute income to people who can't afford it. Those who can afford it are going to complain, of course, but they can afford it. Those who can't afford it, they need to be given some assistance. So you might not find, in terms of overall welfare support, that the amount of money the government spends on overall welfare support probably won't go down that much. The subsidies will go.
Right.
But when it comes to welfare assistance, it won't go down that much, but it will be better targeted. And what I think is much more important than anything else, and people always overlook this, people always ask the question, well, what about those who want to rip off the system by misrepresenting their income so that in my experience, and certainly in the United Kingdom, it was our experience that was a very small number of people. The biggest problem are those who are eligible for welfare but don't know. And they don't know because it comes from multiple ministries. We have dozens, hundreds of different ways in which the government provides welfare assistance at the moment. And often you have to make a new application to multiple agencies in order to get it. And many people who are deserving of that don't know about it. And these are vulnerable people. People who are elderly, people in rural communities, people who are OKU, for example, people who are in the hardcore poor category. They simply are unaware that this is available to them, and so they don't receive it. And with Padu, they should get what they deserve, to which they have a right, by the way, because they are eligible for the help, and the help is there, the money is there, the funding is there, but at the moment they're not getting it. To me, that's much more important than looking out for errant people or people who want to try to rip off the system.
So a big platform like this would potentially eliminate bureaucracy and
Yes.
get to the right people in time.
One of the key economic justifications for a platform like this and switching to direct cash transfers as the form of welfare is that you can remove all of the other welfare programs which are very inefficient, which often don't provide what people want. They don't, for example, give you cash. They give you food parcels or food vouchers or access to products and services. And people don't really always want those things. And they're very inefficient. Now, in principle, you can remove all of those and replace it with a single cash payment or a small handful of different cash payments. You would get a single cash payment for a normal application. But then if you were OKU, you would get additional cash payment because you need medicines and equipment, or if you had more children or less children and so on, you would get additional cash payment. But the number of cash payments would be relatively small and much more straightforward to apply for. And then you remove all of the inefficiency, the wastage, the leakage, and the corruption that we know exists with the rest of the welfare system.
Before we wrap up on Padu here, just wanted to go back. You mentioned the number of people already registered on the database. I think within the first 8 days, the minister said that there was over 1 million already registered, right? So do you see this number perhaps doubling, tripling in the next a week or so?
I think the momentum will build up. I think to begin with, people are having a bit of a wait and see. And they will be, but then eventually they will learn from their friends that it was all right, that it was straightforward, that it was easy. I think the people who would immediately sign up are those who are interested in apps, isn't it? Those who are tech savvy and who feel that they just want to find out and see whether it works.
He particularly mentioned that there was quite a big number of children below 18 who had already registered. So I think
they're probably doing it for their parents because they're the guys who know how to do it. But what will happen is that people will find out that it's actually quite straightforward.
Right.
They will wait, of course, until the government's clearly said that all of these security issues, we've addressed them as much as we can for the moment. And then, of course, which is always typical, it'll all be last minute. So toward the end of the period, everyone will quickly start to sign up. There's always the way. It's the same with the tax. So we expect that. But I'm pretty confident the momentum will build up over time. I'm sure they will get the target.
Is there anything within the Padu system that Malaysians should be aware of?
Oh, the
Concerned
pilot system.
Yeah, exactly.
I think providing feedback to the government will be really important. And I think that the more people can say that they had a problem with this or they had a problem with that, and whatever it might be, and that this is shared, that will be very important because it will help the government fix those quickly, or the civil servants to fix it quickly. Sometimes, it's actually very straightforward. They just didn't understand the way the question was asked, or they couldn't read it on a phone, they didn't get network access or something like that. Sometimes it's very simple. So they can fix it. So I think that would be a very important thing to pick up during the pilot scheme.
But I think edits are not allowed, isn't it? Once you've submitted your information, you're not allowed to edit.
Yes, to begin with. But then if that's going to cause a problem, it's difficult to change that. But normally they allow you to put data in until it's right. But they also have to verify it eventually. And so they're also finding from their end the difficulties that they are going to have in verifying. So that's why we will have to wait a little bit. But even though we're waiting 3 months, I think it's very quick. It's really very quick.
So perhaps that's
it,
a close on Padu now for now, at least. Feel free to jump in anytime when we talk about Dubai move now. So Professor Nick, I think this is when you come in into the discussion. So talks about this attempt to topple the government first came to light when the JCOM deputy director made the claim that members of the opposition had vacationed in Dubai to plan and orchestrate this attempt, right? But ever since, it's been just speculation. It's been from one speculation to another, and there's nothing definitive from either side. We've got a lot of counterclaims and a lot of exchanges going on, but nothing really conclusive, right? So while the Dubai move talks of the Dubai move remain as allegations, there is precedent. And when evaluating the parties accused in the involvement of this culture of faction hopping, how common are the allegations and counter denials?
You see, this happened, I mean, people talking about it, and in fact, it was, the main one happened after the Sheraton move. That was, I think, 2018, towards the end of 2017 and the early 2018. That was something which had really blown up, But before that, there were a lot of issues about party hoppings in the States. You see, before that, especially the East Malaysian state, Sabah or Sarawak, several cases of party hopping. So, because it was in the state, it was not really something which was creating a lot of ripples. But when it happened in the federal government, so like the Sheraton move, and it followed for another move after 1 year or two, and then we have the third one. So after GE15. When the government is already a year, now we are already hearing it again. So something that is unique perhaps to the federal government for the past 3 years or so, but it's not something new for the states. But allegation remains allegations. But I believe the reason why they are doing it because they feel that they have the numbers. I remember that before GE15, there was a lot of talk from the opposition that they have the numbers, but nothing happened. It was not materialized. So the same thing is coming up again because the opposition feel that they are now getting the numbers. They are able to get and persuade a few few members of the government's parties to join them, and and issues or perhaps collect SDs and then issue it to the Istana Negara. So in that respect, they probably do not have the numbers yet, but they are creating sort of panic to the government, creating panics to the people, and this is part of the strategies, I believe. That
is this an attempt to stay relevant?
Definitely,
for both sides.
Yeah, but I believe that in any democratic country, both parties, the government and the opposition, plays a very important role. The opposition plays a check and balance role that is very important to the government, and they should be doing it in a proper and better way. Look at Britain, for example. There's a proper opposition. They have the alternative budget. They have the alternative cabinet. So all these are important to show that they are alternatives to the present government, so rather than going about telling people that they have the numbers. Okay.
And then realistically, can it happen? I mean, you can, talk about it till the cows come home. The opposition can keep going on, but realistically, do they really have the numbers? How do we assess the credibility of what they're claiming?
On the other hand, we heard last year, towards the end of last year, a few members of the opposition from Bersatu was making statement that they support the Prime Minister. So how do you reconcile that with the opposition saying that they have the numbers to go and get the Yang di-Pertuan Agong to appoint them as a Prime Minister? I mean, it's like one party is alleging another party is also alleging at the same time. So it's a question of I think what the Prime Minister has said, I think yesterday or day before, saying that if you have the numbers, why don't you present to Parliament a vote of no confidence to the Prime Minister? But it's never taken up. I mean, we are looking forward for the next parliamentary sittings, I think in February. If there is such a thing, then we'll see. Of course, the scenario of Malaysian politics has changed since the Sheraton move, because what happened was that the show of no confidence need not be on the floor of the House. It can be outside the House. What's happened after the Sheraton move, where the Yang di-Pertuan Agong has invited all members of Parliament to tell him who they support. So that is something new, perhaps, in terms of our political scenario. But I believe that if that happens, then they would have been, lining up to Istana Negara to seek an audience with the Yang di-Pertuan Agong.
Right. One of the things that made this speculation really big was the police reports that were lodged by some members of the opposition who are not a party, or at least do not agree with what was being claimed, as in they have the numbers to topple the government. And I'm alluding to KDM, actually, the Parti Kesejahteraan Malaysia. They were very quick to deny claims that were brought up by Raja Petra, the blogger, the very famous blogger who now resides overseas. So in terms of some of these blocks of opposition, right, like KDM, for example, their denial, how would it impact the overall political landscape, especially the opposition stand? Because the way I see it, it feels like it's just noise, and anything we give further to them now is just legitimizing their something that's just not.
I think the whole idea or
enough.
the whole objective is creating ripples, creating concern, creating panics, which in a way has sort of alert the government to do their things, to make sure that the members are not going to the other side and so on and so forth. But I think making a police report is something new also. Remember that even after Sheraton move, and then after Tan Sri Mohidin was about to leave, there was no one actually making a police report. Even though there was so many issues of people saying that they have their numbers. But this time, why the police report? Well, I believe that they are a bit concerned. I mean, the government is very concerned about this because it can create an environment of uncertainty to the to the government. But again, if you do the report, then the police, the IGP was telling us that a few days ago that the police will be investigating under 142 or 124 of the Penal Code, which is something to do with instigating to cause to cause disharmony in the governments. But again, since the passing in 2012, the special law after ISA, the SOSMA, that law allows the detention of person if a person is charged together with other provisions of the Penal Code. For example, 124 can be read with SOSMA, and person is arrested, can be detained for up to 28 days. That is quite very serious thing that can happen to a person who is detained if the authority decided to pursue investigation under 124 together with SOSMA. So it's quite harsh in a way for detaining a person, for trying to exercise democratic rights to change the government. But then again, 124 requires the prosecution to prove that it is against democratic policy or against the constitutions, against democratic policy or democratic practices and so on and so forth. But then trying to overthrow the government using SD, for example, is already in practice since 2018.
That's correct.
Right? So it's not even mentioned about it being something criminals, not even mentioned to be unconstitutional. How can that be unconstitutional and criminal now if it was not in 2018? So this was the argument from the other side who challenged the authority for investigating those actions of the people. But then again, things have changed. I think have changed because we have reached a level where we have the government which is stable now. With a lot of support, probably 2/3 majority support in Parliament. So why need to change? Let them, do their job for the next 4 or 5 years, and then you run for election. And if you win, then you take over the government. These are the things that people, the ordinary people should understand that. And the ordinary people is also very concerned. People like me and you probably are very concerned. How come we just have 1 year of government after GE15 and suddenly we're going to change government? We are going to repeat the history of 2018 and 2020. So I think that's the reason why I think people is concerned.
I think also, if I might draw an analogy with the United Kingdom, we have had a lot of political instabilities, not so much party hopping, but since 2016 we've had I think 5 prime ministers within the Conservative Party swapping around. And we will have an election this year in the UK, and the damage that it has done to the Conservative Party. And I'm a former Conservative Party member, a former member of the Conservative Party parliamentary candidates list. So I have some interest in this one in the past. But it has caused so much damage to the Conservative Party this instability. And such that when the election comes up, we will be wiped out. There is no question. The Conservative Party will be wiped out. And here in Malaysia, there's an analogy. It's relatively similar. Where the government changes or where the Prime Minister changes without an appeal to the electorate, the government doesn't last for very long, and the Prime Minister doesn't last for very long.
Yeah.
And that's been the experience, hasn't it, in the last few years?
Yes.
But where the Prime Minister has a very clear mandate from the people, then he can claim that, as you say, he has the majority, he has the supermajority. And those who are trying to change that through constitutional means, but without a reference to the electorate, probably won't find themselves there for very long, even if they're successful. And that's that's something we have in the UK, and it's something we are seeing here a little bit. You have to get your mandate from the people.
Right. Yeah.
That is true.
Yeah. Analysts have said that, actually this entire thing has strengthened the government, and they are expecting better GDP numbers. So what's your take on that?
Okay, I mean, I was reading some of the journals on the issue of what causes or GDPs or what FDIs. I'm talking about FDIs now. What is the reason why people come and invest? There were two views. I don't know whether Jeffrey will correct me this one. 2017 there was an article by researchers, right, say that that stability is not a factor actually to attract FDIs. But in 2019 there was another article, and this article published in Nature, one of the most important journals in the world, and they say that stability or political stability or stability of government is not the main factor. It's trade openness.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah. So in other words, people will still come in and invest in Malaysia irrespective of the stability of the government, right? Unless, of course, the country is in war. Then perhaps that's a different story altogether.
Yes, it's stability of policy,
Yes.
not necessarily the stability of the government.
Yes.
Because even if you have the same government, the same coalition, ministers come and ministers go. They're here today, they're gone tomorrow. That's just the truth of it. There's a reshuffle regularly. So you can't rely upon having the same minister for 5 years in any ministry.
Right.
So what you're really looking for as an international investor is having at least the same policy
Right.
and clear policy. That's what's important. It's got to be very clear, and it's got to be competitive with respect to other countries where you could potentially invest. And that's really the problem for Malaysia, which is not so much that the investment environment here is not very good.
Yeah.
It's just that the investment environment in other countries around the region is improving much more effectively. I mean, I was in Vietnam before the Christmas period. It's extremely vibrant and a very exciting, growing country, 3 times larger in population than Malaysia. And in Indonesia, it's 9 times larger in population. So that's the real issue when it comes to foreign direct investment in particular. It's about policy stability, having the right policies, making them very clear, making them very easy, making them competitive against other regional peers. The politics is not an issue. Investors are investing for 10, 20, 30 years. They don't expect the government to be the same.
Yes.
If they did, you wouldn't be in a democracy, right? Because in a democracy, the government should change periodically. We just don't want. We want it to change in a smooth a smooth way. That's it.
So basically, you're saying this move is not going to dampen investors' confidence in the
yes.
investment
No,
market. in
it
Malaysia,
isn't.
right?
And if anyone
Yes,
thinks
yeah.
that that's going to, that's a reason why that people should be concerned.
Yeah.
I don't think people should be concerned about this at all.
But I think people is concerned about stability of the government itself.
Yes.
So they can live happily ever after. I think that's a concern of the people like me and you, I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they want to get on with their lives.
Yes.
They have better things to worry about than this.
I think one issue is, switching sides, and really that shows a lot in terms of the loyalty that you, as an MP, as a representative, you should remain loyal to your constituency, right? The people voted for the party, not for you necessarily. But if you're going to switch sides and then, in a way betray your voters, I think that's probably, is that more of the issue here?
I think
instability in that regard.
I think when they drafted the law on party hopping, and they agreed to the law, they knew that the law is not good enough. Simply because there's so many loopholes. All right, so you can only lose your seat if you resign from your party and join another party, right? But if you are fired by your party or you join en bloc to another party, then you'll not lose your seats. So what happened recently, I mean last year, the end of last year, December, I think, there are at least 6 members of Bersatu Party who are members of parliament who announced their support to the Prime Minister. But they will not lose their seat because that is not resigning, neither they were fired by the parties, and the party will not fire them. Why? Because if they fire them, then the members of parliament will remain as members of parliament. They will not lose their seats. So they know that the law is not so intact. The law, there's a lot of loopholes. So I do not know why they agreed to that law. I believe that it is for the benefit of both sides. I mean,
so that they can keep doing it.
Yes, I mean, if you go to parliament and vote against your party, there's nothing wrong with that. Except that morally it's wrong, but then legally it's not wrong. I think that's a problem with the law with regard to anti-hopping. So I believe that if the government is brave enough, then they should be tabling the amendment to the law to make it more strengthened, to strengthen it, to plug all the loopholes.
Should the Prime Minister address that now, to just bury this and this issue once and for all?
It has to be, because you see, you need the 2/3 majority. The government say that they have the 2/3 majority, so do it now. Unless you don't have that. But so in that respect, there are many things that can be changed now, because you need to change the constitution using a 2/3 majority. Without that, you cannot change the constitution. But I think the idea that the law on party hopping remains in the constitution probably there's some reason for it, because if it is the ordinary law, you just need a simple majority, right? So because they do not want the law to be changed easily, because for the past, I think 5 or 6 years, I think the government does not have the 2/3 majority. But now they say they had the 2/3 majority. So I believe that they should be doing it now.
In the UK, we don't have anti-party hopping. People are allowed to move whichever party they wish, and in fact, it's considered to be actually quite a moral thing to do. If you genuinely object to what your party is doing on principle, they call it crossing the floor.
Exactly,
is very common, and in fact, Winston Churchill did it, so it's not unknown, and he went on to be the Prime Minister. But what we do have, which has been used more recently, is a recall.
Or election.
And that is, if your MP does that, abandons his party or her party, and then crosses the floor and starts supporting policies that you didn't vote for, or if they were behaving badly for some other reason, you can get a percentage of the electorate sign a petition, and they will be recalled.
That's
and that
the
means
right thing.
They have to
to
stand
do.
again
Yeah.
and that's happened recently, not because of party hopping, but because some MPs have been accused of malpractice or crimes or this sort of thing. And it's been successful. You know, I mean, the electorate in the constituency, it's not a huge number of people, but it's got to be enough to be representative. They get the petition together online or go around house to house and get it signed. And then the MP has to stand again. And if he's done the right thing, he will be re-elected. There was one member of Parliament, David Davies, who left the Conservative Party on a point of principle, then resigned, then there was a by-election, and was re-elected. and in that sense, they can actually prove that or show that what they're doing is morally and politically justifiable. But if they're hopping for personal reasons, then they'll be caught by the voters in the end.
I think in our case, if you leave and then you lose your seat, you can run again.
That is true.
Without a recall election requirement. So that's why people are mooting of this idea of having a recall elections, fixed term parliament, that kind of thing, just to reduce these party hopping things.
Correct.
It's interesting. It would be interesting to know how many people involved in the party hopping in the past were kicked out at the last election, and then if you remind members of parliament the success rate of being re-elected if you behave in this way is very low, it might discourage them from doing it.
I mean, if you keep electing the bad guy, then that speaks more to the electorate, the people voting.
Yes.
It's on them, but I think ideally, yes, I think we should have this recall in place to curb this.
Yes, it is. But I believe that we need to give the new law some time to see how effective is it. We have seen now that there is serious loopholes of members of parliament from one party supporting the other, supporting the prime minister from the other party, whereas they should not be doing that, because they are being elected with the banner of the party that they supported before, and people elected them because they belong to that party and they run under the name of that party.
But they are also elected by their constituents.
Exactly. Yes.
So if the government has a policy which benefits their constituency, but it goes against the policy of their political party, who should they, or how should they vote? They should vote in favor of what benefits their constituents, even if that means going against the policy of their political party. And they should be allowed to do that, because that's their job. So I'm not wholly in favor of this idea that when you join a political party, you are bound by what happens. Because if you're elected, and then during 5 years, you're elected on a particular manifesto, and then over 5 years, new policies come along, and you didn't have a manifesto commitment when you were elected on the new policy. So you have to make a decision as it goes along. So MPs should be given more opportunity to make their own judgment based on what's in the best interests of their constituents. Because, I mean, I don't elect anybody anymore. I don't vote in Malaysia or in the United Kingdom. But if I did, and when I did, I wouldn't vote for an MP who was a bad MP, even if he was a conservative.
Before we round up, Sharon, was there something that you wanted to add?
Oh yeah,
at the end?
Well, this is for both of you. Political wayang kulit, yes or no?
Should not be. I mean, you are elected by the people. You should be giving everything to the people. You owe that duty to the government, to the constitution, to the Rukun Negara. You should not be acting. Acting as if that you are the best of person in the world, whereas you are not. So I believe that sincerity, upholding the law, governance, and integrity has to be there. Always, all the time.
I think it's a sign of a vibrant democracy. I remember when I first came to Malaysia, it was when Tun Mahathir was still the Prime Minister. And whenever I wanted to talk about politics, people would change to talk about food. But then when he resigned and Tun Abdullah took over, I couldn't stop people talking about politics, even when I wanted to ask about food. And I think, yes, I mean, it is a bit of a movie sketch, isn't it, on all of this? But people will use the remote eventually, and they'll switch over and watch something else. It's interesting for a bit. But actually, I think politicians need to understand that everybody has better things in their life to do than watch them all the time. And former politicians as well, by the way. We get a lot of noise from former politicians, and I think people are not as interested in what they have to say as they might think. So politics is interesting, but there are more interesting things to listen about too, isn't it?
Pretty much, Yeah, I think so. That's about it. Thank you so much. That's all the time we have for this episode. Sharon, thank you for joining me
Thank you so much.
on this show.
Thanks for
And
having
pleasure
us.
here,
It's a
yes.
pleasure.
Thanks
Of
for
course,
having
our
us.
two
Good
guests,
talk, yeah.
Professor Jeffrey, thank you, and to Professor
Thank you very
Nikama.
much.
Hopefully, you'll come back again
Yeah,
Certainly, we
for
do it
your
again.
second
certainly. Yeah.
round here. And to all our viewers at home, thank you so much for being loyal and watching our videos from week to week. It's now come into the 16th straight week of Beyond the Headlines since we first came up with our pilot episode. So thank you so much for all your views. Keep those views coming in. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, the channel that you're watching right now at NST Online. And if you did like this episode that you've just watched, please give us a like. Don't forget to also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly Twitter, at NST Online. That's it for now. Thank you for watching. Till next time, goodbye.